Hello, welcome to another episode of Movies, they're pretty good. I'm your host, Travis Dudding, and today we're going to talk about the 1990 film directed by David Lynch, Wild at Heart. Now, this one's a little harder to find than most of David Lynch's films for some reason. You know, it's always it has to do with rights issues, which is why this is why I'm a big proponent of physical media. I got the Blu-ray, the Shout Factory Shout Select version. I think they're gonna do a 4K soon, is what I heard. But this is how I saw it the first time. I couldn't find it streaming anywhere, so I just went to Amoeba when I lived near Amoeba. Well, I didn't live near there. I lived within driving distance for me, who likes to drive. And just went and picked it up because it was the only David Lynch film I hadn't seen at the time, and I wanted to see it because I'm a weirdo completionist, and bought it. Didn't regret it. Love it. I also got it on a Laserdisc, one that actually works. There's back for anyone that cares about that. But yeah, great movie. I love this one so much. It's super fun. It's super weird. That kind of goes without saying when you're talking about David Lynch. But let's get right into it. Opens with some cool opening credits with a fire background. Well, starts with a match being lit, and then it's just fire over the back of the opening credits. Then cut right to Cape Fear in South Carolina, I believe South Carolina. You got Glenn Miller's "In the Mood" playing the that. If you didn't know the name of the song or who composed it, you would at least recognize that melody as usually it's like to signify a movie is taking place in the 1930s or the 20s or something. They'll play some shit like that, but that's not the case with this movie. It is taking place in modern times, which was 1990. So you get Sailor, which is Nicolas Cage's character, gets confronted by a man on a staircase. They're at this like fancy hotel or event center or something, and he comes up to her, or he comes up to him saying, "It's like, hey, I just ran into Lula's mom in the bathroom, and she said you were trying to fuck her in there." And then Nicolas Cage is like, "Oh boy, here we go." You could just tell that he knows that it's about to get bad, and it does. He ends up beating this guy to death because he does pull out a knife on him. He doesn't just do this unprompted, because he got accused of fucking his girlfriend's mom. But so guy pulls a knife out. Laura Dern's character Lula screams like "Sailor," and they get in a fight. He ends up bashing this guy's head in, and kills him. And then we get an iconic GIF. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but it's Nicolas Cage with a cigarette, and he's all bloody, and he's pointing up the stairs. I had seen that before, way before I saw this movie. But it's super cool. But yeah, this movie just like right off the bat, with just an insane, over the top scene right away. Obviously, manslaughter, goes to jail. So he's in prison for it says 22 months and 28 days later. But before it transitions to him in prison, we see a quick insert shot of a hand going over a crystal ball. Now, this is the first of countless Wizard of Oz references, whether it's just outright spoken Wizard of Oz references or visual iconography, whatever it is. There's so much Wizard of Oz in this movie. There is an entire documentary about David Lynch and his Wizard of Oz references throughout the movies. And he does have them in the other movies, but this is the one that's just like, way on the nose, and, I love it. I'm not saying that like in a bad way, but yeah, there's just the first of many Wizard of Oz references that are going to happen in this movie. So like I said, it's like just shy of 2 years later. He's in prison. He's getting a phone call. He's trying to call Lula. The mom picks up. Marietta is the mom's name. She's played by Diane Ladd, who is Laura Dern's real life mom, and also got a an Oscar nomination from this. One of the few movies, one of the few David Lynch movies to get Oscar recognition. I don't think he never won anything, as far as I know. I might be forgetting something, but I'm pretty sure none of his films ever won an Oscar. But yeah, so she picks up the phone. She's threatening him, like, you're never going to speak to her again, you know. And obviously, you know, everyone's adults here, and she has very little control over that. So, and then Lula leaves, goes and picks him up from prison in this like nice convertible, throws him his jacket, and it's his snakeskin jacket, and he's all excited to see the jacket, almost more excited to see the jacket than he is to see her. But he's like, "Oh, did I ever tell you about this jacket? It's a symbol of right, it's a symbol of my individuality and my belief in personal freedom," is what he says. And he will say that multiple times, which is why I have it memorized. They drive off. Immediately cuts to the first of many sex scenes in this first half of the movie, and it's interesting. It's very like there's a red tone over it, and it, you know, fades completely to red. And I wrote that down just because when I was writing my notes, and then I did realize a pattern which I will bring up later. So there is a significance to the color at which the sex scenes fade into, and I'll get to that when it's time. But afterwards, you see Sailor laying in bed while Lula's getting redressed. And I like I don't know that there's any significance to it, but I just like the way that he's laying on the bed with his feet up against the wall, and he's balancing like a radio. He's holding the wire or the cord and kind of balancing on his feet up against the wall, and smoking a cigarette. You know, it just visually looks great. You know, doesn't have to be important or signify anything. It's just looks interesting, and I think that's what's one of the more important things in filmmaking, at least for me. That's what I look for. It's like, if it looks cool, then that's good. You're heading in the right direction. But that, you know, they're just having a conversation. She's bringing up how when she was 15, her mom was trying to give her the sex talk, saying you're probably going to get interested in sex, you know, or whatever. And Sailor brings up, like, I thought you said you were raped by your Uncle Pooch when you were 13. You know, super dark thing to bring up right off the bat, but, you know. And then we get a flashback to that happening, you know, not it happening, but after it has just happened. The mom comes in and realizes what happened and starts beating the shit out of this guy, and then we see him going off a cliff in a car and the car exploding. So this is our first indication. Well, I guess not our first indication, but is one of another early indication that her mom has some power over people, to, like, you know, if you harm my daughter, you're gonna fucking die, you know. So and, you know, obviously, like most things, more on that later. But yeah, they kind of, you know, brush that off, you know. I guess just not saying that like it wasn't important, but just like, you know, they just kind of move on because that's something they've already talked about. Obviously, it's kind of an established thing for them, just new to us. But at a certain point, you hear, like, through the walls, like, a woman laughing, because they're just in some motel or something. And Lula says that, like, oh man, that woman's laugh gives me the creeps. Sounds like the Wicked Witch, you know, Wizard of Oz reference. And then we get a cut to her mom, Marietta, talking to Johnny Farragut, who's played by Harry Dean Stanton, another Lynch mainstay, and she's wanting him to go after them and bring Lula home and get rid of Sailor and all this stuff. And Johnny is like, they're adults, you know, and he's not a murderer. That was self-defense. It's pretty clear, you know, and she's just not having any of it. and says that she's going to get this guy Santos involved. And he's like, all right, So he obviously doesn't want this guy being involved. And you can tell that they're kind of a thing, So there's either some sort of like jealousy thing, like he doesn't want her with this other guy, but also you can kind of get the sense that this other guy is trouble, and it, even though he's being sent to stop this thing from happening and brings a gun and all this stuff, like Johnny Farragut is a nice guy from what we see in this film, like and it's Harry Dean Stanton. How can you not like him? And then we get our first flashback into what actually happened in the bathroom before the fight on the staircase. And this kind of gets pieced throughout the film. And we get a little more information each time. And this is where we see sailors in the bathroom, in the men's room, and here comes Marietta, and she's visibly drunk, saying like, "Oh, how would you like to fuck Lula's mama?" And then he's just kind of like, "All right, obviously, like, you've had too much to drink, and I'm not gonna do that, so let's just like get out of here." And then she starts to get a little more aggressive. Now we cut back to Sailor and Lula back in their hotel room, hotel, Holiday Inn. They're getting ready. They got some concert that they're going to go to. I forget if they said a specific band name, but it's like a, speed metal concert basically. And they're like, "Oh, you ready to go?" And then I love this transition because she's painting her nails, saying like, "Oh yeah, once I'm done painting my nails, then then let's go." Oh yeah, but yeah, real quick we get the other flashback to the bathroom, and then we get a little more information, and this is where we see them in a stall, and this is where it's kind of going a little further, where she's getting more pushy and he's more like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Cuts back to them, and they're still getting ready, and Sailor's like, you know what, fuck it, like, how about I just break parole and we drive out to California? And she gets all excited and she starts dancing on the bed, and this is the transition I'm talking about, because I love that she's like, kind of, quick feet on the bed, and then it transitions to her, quick feet dancing at the club, where they're seeing the concert. But yeah, just cool transition, obviously. And so yeah, they're at this metal show. There's like, people moshing and stuff, and then at a certain point some other guy kind of starts dancing up on her, and Sailor clocks this and kind of pulls a guy off, because she's like, has a look like she doesn't want this to happen, so he kind of pulls him off, and then gestures for the band to stop, and they stop immediately. And then he grabs a microphone from them, and wait, no, before that he says like, "Hey, like, I think you owe her an apology. You bumped into her, and if you don't apologize, I'm gonna kick your ass," basically like that, and he does end up throwing him or punching him or something, and then the guy eventually apologizes, and all that, super weird, but whatever. And so then after this whole interaction has taken place, after he's already stopped the band and everyone's watching this, and then he's like, you guys have some of the same energy E had. E is Elvis. He's got a very Elvis personality, with the snakeskin jacket and everything. That's kind of his whole deal, and the way he's talking and everything is very Elvis-esque. And I just love the way he's just like calls him E, and then that's it. That's the only time I've ever heard Elvis referred to as E. I'm not a huge Elvis fan, so maybe that was a thing, but it's I just think it's funny. And then basically gives them the signal, and they immediately start playing an Elvis song. I think they do Just Love Me, Not Love Me Tender. And we'll get back to that one in a sec. But yeah, then he starts, singing "Love Me," and all the women are, swooning in the crowd and everything, and it's super interesting, because there's like the same exact women screaming sound clip that gets used the whole time, and then at a certain point it's just like repeating it, just like it's a button on a sound machine is like and then just hitting it like it's an air horn on like that type of consistency. So then at this post sex scene is where Lula asks Sailor, like, hey, like, why didn't you sing me Love Me Tender by Elvis? And he said, oh, I already told you, like, I'm the only person I'm going to sing Love Me Tender to is my wife. So, and obviously they're not married yet. Then they keep talking. Lula says something about having a vision of, like, the Wicked Witch coming after her. And, we see the vision, and it's clearly her mom as the Wicked Witch. Um, but I forget the exact context of how that comes up, but it's just only to say that it's another Wizard of Oz thing. They have a conversation about when they each started smoking and which brands they use and stuff like that. And then they bring up how her dad died, or she brings up how her dad died, how he basically like lit himself on fire or something, and burned to death by lighting himself on fire. Self-immolation. And then, which we will learn later on, is not entirely true, but we'll get to that when we get to it. We get a couple different shots of we see Johnny is following them to New Orleans. He knows that, or he's pretty sure that that's where they're going to go. We see each of them driving, different scenes. We see Marietta, like immediately as soon as Johnny's gone, she's meeting with the Santos guy that we know is bad news. And you can just kind of tell from the vibe that he's just a bad guy. And she's obviously hiring him to go kill Sailor and bring Lula home. Johnny's just gonna bring her home. He's not the type of guy to just go kill this guy, because he knows that he's not all that bad of a guy. But so she goes to this other guy because she wants this guy to do the dirty work. So he's like, yeah, I'll go kill this guy, but I also want to kill Johnny Farragut. And she's hesitant, but she wants this other guy dead so bad that she's willing to have this guy go kill her boyfriend or whatever. So then, eventually, she agrees to this, although hesitantly. We see 3 phone calls being made. The first one to a guy called Mr. Reindeer, who just looks to be this powerful rich guy. He's sitting on the toilet when he's taking the call and just has some like naked girl just sitting in there with him, just while he's taking his shit, so, and taking phone calls. But yeah, obviously he's going to have something to do with this. I think that maybe Mr. Reindeer might be the higher up bad guy, like above Marcel or Santos. I don't know if it's Marcellus Santos, but that's in my head, but I could just be thinking Marcellus Wallace from Pulp Fiction. But yeah, anyways, this guy's Mr. Reindeer is this character's name. And another phone call's made to, then 2 more are made. I don't know that we see both of them, but one is made to Juanita and the other to Perdita. They're both sisters. I don't think you see Perdita in this scene. You just hear her voice. Juanita's played by Grace Zabriskie from Twin Peaks, and she's Laura Palmer's mom in Twin Peaks. And then Perdita is played by Isabella Rossellini, obviously from Blue Velvet. But yeah, all of these people are going to be involved in the potential killing of Sailor, and maybe Johnny Farragut too. So we see them pull up in New Orleans. We get another sex scene fading into a color. I think this one's kind of more like pinkish, I would say. Get a scene with them at a bar, and some guy just comes up, sits next to them. It's Freddie Jones from Elephant Man and Dune. Then he just starts like making these weird noises. He has a really high pitched voice, and I don't even remember what he like tells them because I'm having trouble remembering what is in the final cut and what's in like the deleted scenes. But it's not, what he says isn't really important. I know he talks about like birds and stuff, but the reason that he has this high pitched voice is he had recorded his dialogue, and at a certain point, David Lynch is listening back to it, and then he hits fast forward or something to get to another part, and it's playing it in fast forward, obviously pitched way up. And he's like, oh my God, this is so funny. And he called Freddie Jones and was like, hey, like, do you mind if we pitch up your voice? And Freddie's like, yeah, do whatever you want, Let's, whatever. You're the artist, so yeah, go ahead. And so yeah, it's just because it sounded funny, and so that's why he's got this like weird high pitched voice. And this is like kind of what makes it, I guess, maybe this is the Munchkin reference to Wizard of Oz, just because of the voice. We get a scene of Marietta back home, and she's freaking out. She's having second thoughts about this whole thing, setting up Johnny to get killed as well. She has no second thoughts about Sailor getting killed, but Johnny, she's feeling guilty. She's trying to call Santos to get it reversed, and he's like, what can I do? It's already set in motion. It's already gonna happen. But yeah, she's just freaking out at Home Alone. And this is like where she gets the lipstick and starts putting it on a little too much, but nothing crazy yet. But she's putting it on, and I think she starts maybe coloring her arm at this point. Yeah, she's coloring her arm with the lipstick, and you're like, all right, where's this going? We get a scene with Mr. Reindeer having a fancy dinner at his place. There's all these other like young, beautiful women there, and they're getting a talking to from I forget the actress's name, but she was the aunt, like Jeffrey's aunt in Blue Velvet, and she's been in a bunch of other stuff too. Like it's definitely like a well seen character actor for sure. But I just don't. I didn't write it down, so I always forget her name. But yeah, she's there like lecturing these girls, like you better do your fucking she's being like very blunt with them and everything, like you better do your fucking job or you're fucking out of here, that type of thing. Then cut back to Sailor and Lula. They're going, oh yeah, but before that, while they're at this fancy dinner, this is where we see Juanita show up with these two other guys. And so this is like where they're gonna get the details of what they got to do for getting either Johnny and or Sailor. So yeah, back to the jazz club at Sailor and Lula, and they're sitting off to the side while the band is playing, and they're having a conversation about their first you don't get the qualifier of like why they're talking about this unless you watch the deleted scenes, but what starts this story is she wants to know the first time that he had a sexual experience that wasn't with a prostitute, basically. So it's that's probably how he lost his virginity, was to a prostitute, basically sex worker, but that's what they say on that. But yeah, in the final cut of the movie, it cuts like midway into the story, and he's following this girl up the stairs and stuff, and just going into great detail about her outfit and how great her ass looked and all this stuff, and we kind of get the gist that she either was involved in some sort of like gun or drugs thing because there was like a bunch of guns everywhere, you know. But yeah, that's about it, you know. And so they just goes into detail with the story and everything, and she's getting turned on by it. And then, you know, obviously because they got turned on, go back to the hotel and have sex again. Now this is this is the point where it goes a little longer than the other ones, but it's changing colors the whole time. And what's the order of the colors? Red, orange, yellow, blue, green. Wait. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv, you know, it's the colors of the rainbow. Somewhere over the rainbow, Wizard of Oz. Are we getting it? You know, so like I said, super on the nose. But you know, I noticed that there was something, even though like the earlier ones aren't in the order of the rainbow, they are. It's establishing like it's fading into a color, and then now this time we get the full rainbow spectrum, you know. Now we cut back to Marietta to see her progress on her makeup routine, and now she has a full beard of lipstick basically because she just keeps going around and around, and you know, still like visibly freaking out, you know. Quick insert shot back to the main characters, and then they're talking about her cousin Dell, who we get like not really flashbacks, but we see the story that she's telling, and he's played by Crispin Glover, and so he was obsessed with Christmas, and you know, he went by like Christmas Dell, and you know, always wore he was always worried that these people with black gloves were coming to get him. You know, obviously just someone with some mental issues and just had a bunch of different quirks, you know. And he was worried about the black glove people coming to get him. He had these roaches. He got obsessed with roaches, and then he was like putting them on his butthole because he liked the way it like tickled, and you know, all this stuff, you know. And then just one day he just disappeared, you know, and just never came back. They never saw him again, you know. But yeah, that, you know, they're finished telling that story. We cut to Johnny Farragut. He's watching TV. He's watching like this, like, you know, brutal mauling of like a lion catching a gazelle and stuff. And I just like the way he's like sitting. Like, it looks so uncomfortable, but that is like, you know, you go to a hotel and you prop the pillows up and you still are like sitting, you know, with your head like that, you know. It's just, it's not comfortable, but you know, what are you gonna do? And you know, he's drinking like some whiskey or something, so you know, it's just a little loosened up and everything, and probably not too worried about how comfortable the bed is. But then Marietta calls him in the hotel, and this is where we see that her face is just completely just all lipstick. You know, there's just no visible skin on her head. It's just all red, you know. And she's like in full panic mode, full just insanity, and just, I don't know, it's just so funny looking. But you know, this is David Lynch. You know, what do you expect? But yeah, it's then it's the next day. They're driving into Texas or through Texas. Maybe they've already been in Texas, but they're in Texas because if you're on a California from East Coast, you know, they're probably taking, well, no, because they're not on the interstate. I was gonna say they'd probably take the 10, but no, they're on like 2-lane highways. But yeah, they're driving, or now Lula's the one at the wheel right now, and she's listening to the radio, and you know, it's news story after news story that's like this horrific thing, and this murder and this kidnapping and this missing person, this natural disaster. And she's like, I can't take it anymore, like, pulls over, and then it's like, you better find some music on there, because and he finds some like rock station, and they're like dancing on the side of the road. We see Marietta arrives in New Orleans to meet up with Johnny. She's thinking that she can, stop this or something. So she's there. Obviously, she didn't do the smart thing and telling him like, hey, I kind of screwed up, and, one thing led to another, and now they're going to try to kill you. That's the smart thing to do, but she doesn't. So she just pretends everything's fine, and they just have dinner and stuff, and that's about it. Nothing actually helpful to the situation. But while they're talking, Johnny just straight up asks, because he could see through what's going on, so he gets an idea, but he doesn't know for sure, and asks if Santos is involved, and she just straight up lies, obviously. So then while they're driving, back to Sailor and Lula, while they're driving, Sailor comes clean about the fact that he was there when her dad died, and kind of adds a little bit more to the story, saying that he was working for Santos, and he was like a driver and stuff, and he was somewhere, and then a fire happened, and he's pretty sure that he would later learn that it was her dad, and that basically he's pretty sure that it was the mom and Santos together killed the dad, not that he lit himself on fire. So more context. I guess it's like kind of, I mean, it's definitely like a bittersweet thing. It's like, hey, at least my dad didn't kill himself, but he was murdered by my mom. So that's kind of a lose-lose. But I guess you have better feelings about the person that's gone, I guess, so you can kind of better honor them. It's not nothing ever makes it better, but I you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, then when they're driving at night, we get another vision. She's looking off to the side, and then sees another wicked witch. That's her mom, flying on the broom next to her. Cut back to New Orleans, and Marietta's telling Johnny to, hey, just pack fast and let's get out of here, But then they separate, she goes to her room, he goes to his room. As soon as he opens the door, he gets knocked over the head and, gets knocked out. Cut back to Sailor and Lula. They're driving down the road at night, and they start to notice that there's clothes scattered on the road. And they're like, okay, something's up. Eventually, they come across a car that is off the road and crashed. And I think it's completely flipped. I think it's upside down. But they pull over to check it out, and they immediately find like two dead bodies, sticking out of the car. And it's obvious that they're dead. And they're like, oh my God, like, kind of trying to figure out what to do. And then they realize that there's a third person who is still alive and up and about. And it's Sherilyn Fenn from Twin Peaks. And she's kind of looking around for her purse, and she's upset, like, oh my God, my mom's going to be so mad at me. I can't believe I lost it. Just very like out of it from the situation that's like actually happening. So obviously she's in shock. And we can see her that she's bleeding from her head, and then she also can't find her bobby pins, and all this stuff, like anything but like, oh my God, I was in an accident and I'm hurt. And then she's like, rubbing her head. It's like, oh, there's sticky stuff in my hair, because it was blood, and then, eventually they're trying to figure out like what they even can do. And I mean, this is pre-cell phones, so you can't just call 911 from right there, and even in a cell phone times, there's probably no signal where they're at. I know a lot of times you can still get their emergency services, but not always. But yeah, when they're trying to figure out what to do, she ends up dying right there in her arms, and it's obviously extremely upsetting situation. And this is basically the halfway point in the movie. Everything's been like fun and games for them, and this is where it takes a huge tone shift after this. This is the first really bad thing, besides the manslaughter that got him put in prison for 2 years at the beginning of the movie. Besides that, this is the first like really bad thing that's happened to them in the movie. So this is where it kind of starts going downhill. So then we come back to the hotel in New Orleans, and Marietta's like in the lobby, upset, like talking to the hotel staff, like, I'm looking for Johnny. He was supposed to meet me down here, and he's not here. And they're trying to figure out if there's anything they can even do. They're kind of confused because she's obviously leaving certain things out, details out that would be helpful. So, and while they're having this conversation, Santos shows up, and then this basically confirms for her that he's dead, or at least a goner. There's nothing she can do now. It's like it's too late. Oh yeah, because the note that was left, that's supposed to be that Johnny left, said that he had gone buffalo hunting. So, and that obviously that's some sort of code, and obviously he's not the one that left that message. We cut to Juanita, who has Johnny with those other two guys, and they're doing some like voodoo ritual. It is New Orleans, so they're doing a voodoo, but not that she's of any of the cultures that should be doing voodoo, but that's what they're doing. And but yeah, it's kind of vague, like what's like actually happening and everything. Cutting back to Sailor and Lula, they're pulling into Big Tuna, Texas. Office reference, no. And they pull up to this like house in the middle of the desert. Sailor goes and knocks on the door. It's Perdita. It's Isabella Rossellini, and they obviously know each other. And he's like, "Hey, we had a pact way back that if one of us found out that the other one had a contract on them, to be killed, that we would tell each other, And so he asks, like, "Do I have a contract out of me?" And she says no. But we don't know. Well, no, we do know, because we saw her get the phone call, so never mind. I was going to say, we don't know that she knows, that she might not be lying. She might not know yet. She knows, because we saw her get the phone call, so never mind. But yeah, so she lies to him, says, like, no, like, nothing I know of. So they leave, they go check into their motel. She stays behind in the room while he goes to get some stuff. He comes back and he's like, kind of, what's that smell? And she's like, oh, like I barfed over there, and didn't have anything to clean it up. So there's just like a pile of barf with flies on it on the carpet. But because she threw up, she's like, hey, I think just with the traveling, let's just kind of, let's stay here for a couple days instead of just moving on. Let's just wait till I feel better, and then we'll get back on the road. So they're sitting out, in kind of like the courtyard area of the motel with like all the weird locals, and it's I forget most of their names, but the one actor I for sure know is Jack Nance, and and he's always crazy, and he comes up and he's wearing like the tank top and everything, and says like, starts telling this weird story about, it's like, I have a dog and it barks some, and he's like, now you may picture my dog, but I haven't told you what my dog looks like. He's like, you may even picture Toto from the Wizard of Oz. And then he just barks, and then that's it. There's no point to that story. It's just like a fucking weirdo, just and if you ever been out in the middle of nowhere and interacted with a random local, that's how it can be sometimes. So not even in the middle of nowhere. You can go to fucking LA and deal with someone like that, you know. So that's just oh yeah, and then you find out that like one of the rooms they're filming like a porno in one of the rooms down there, and then we just see these like uh BBW women coming out like topless, and then these like two shady looking guys that are obviously like the like producers or something, you know, or just like the pimps that are providing these women for the who knows, you know. It just they look shady no matter what they're doing, you know. But so yeah, they're sitting there, they're interacting with these people, and then here comes Bobby Peru, played by Willem Dafoe. And Willem Dafoe is no stranger to playing insane people. And this is like, you know, whatever like normal insane Willem Dafoe character is, this is a level 10 Willem Dafoe character, you know, so which is like a level 20 for other actors. And we find out that he's a Marine because he's got the USMC tattoo on his hand. I forget which part of his hand. I think it is just like on this part, but yeah, he's got like fucked up weird teeth and stuff, you know. Like it almost looks like braces, and then you're like, oh no, those are just like rotted teeth, and then like they almost look like pointed, you know. And it just gross, like gross looking dude with the slick back hair and everything, and you know, and just obviously like you could tell this guy from his vibe that he is bad news, you know, and just like, you know, inappropriate jokes and just a gross dude that you don't really want to be hanging out with. But yeah, he's a Marine. You find out that he was a Nam, and he's giving the other guy a hard time because he was in the Navy and during that time, and you know, all this stuff. And you know, he wasn't in the shit like me, you know, that type of thing. But yeah, so they go back to their room because they're tired and obviously probably just don't want to deal with this guy. And then we get a flashback to her getting an abortion, probably after she was raped by the uncle. And it wasn't even like really an uncle, it was just like a business partner. But, you know, that still, you know, she's underage and this happened, and then they got her an abortion. And so there's that flashback. And then we do find out that, or she does say, like, hey, like, I found out I'm pregnant, you know, so which explains me throwing up and you know all that. And so he's like, hey, you know, that's fine with me. And she's like, hey, no offense to you, I'm not sure if it's all right with me. And he's like, that's fine too, you know. So he's very progressive. Then we get to presumably the next day, and she's in the room by herself. Knock on the door, answers it, and it's Bobby. And he's like, can I take a piss, you know, and just like barges in the room. And it's like, we're at a fucking hotel, like where's your room, like next door, you know. But you know, he's just this is just, well, you know, basically what happens is he's gonna use the bathroom, then he's gonna come out and he's gonna sexually assault her. So you know, that's why he's there. And you know, it's an extremely uncomfortable scene. It kind of, you know, shows how someone could freeze up in a situation like that, because you know, that's always the dumb like reason. It's like, why don't you just run away? You know, until you've experienced a traumatic event, you don't know what it's like. And even if you have experienced a traumatic event and you handled it a different way, doesn't mean everyone else handles it the same way. So, you know, that's my stance on that. So yeah, she freezes up, and you know, it's a very uncomfortable scene. You know, eventually he gets what he wants and leaves. It doesn't go. I'm gonna say it doesn't go too far, but it already is too far. But you know what I mean? Like it could have been worse, but doesn't make it okay. But you know, so he leaves. She's upset. She's got these like red slippers on that look like the ruby slippers, and she's clicking her heels while she's like processing this and crying and stuff alone in the room, and she's got no one there because Sailor's gone out to the store or whatever the hell he is doing. But then we cut to him, and he's broken down on the side of the road, and while he's trying to fix his car, here comes Bobby Peru in his car, and he's like, "Oh, you got in car trouble," and, just like goes to help him, and then gives him a ride to the auto shop or whatever, and then they go to a bar and have some drinks and stuff. And then he's like, "Hey, you want to make some money? There's a feed store that would be pretty easy to rob. Like, so what do you say?" That type of thing. And he's like, "I don't know." And then, but then he like lets slip. And it's like, "Hey, well, you need some extra money since, being in a family way and all." And then he's like, "How do you know that Lula's pregnant?" But he doesn't like come right out and say that. And then while they're having this conversation, then we see it happening through the crystal ball from earlier, the Wizard of Oz crystal ball. And so someone's watching this go down. So they get back into the motel. Sailor lets Lula know what's going on, and obviously she's like, "Hey, don't do that. Like, I don't trust this guy." But she doesn't come right out and say what happened, which is okay. But she doesn't say, so he doesn't know. Like, Sailor has no idea. He just knows that this guy's a shady guy, but he doesn't know like what he's really capable of or how bad he really is, But he's desperate, and he's like, I don't know. I think I just got to do it, And then while they're having this conversation is when we get the titular line where she's upset with this whole situation, and she says, this whole world's wild at heart and weird on top," which almost didn't make it into the movie. I guess like the writer, I forget his name. Oh yeah, Barry Gifford. So he's the writer of the novel series that there's like a bunch of books with these characters, Sailor and Lula. And I think there's even stories with just like Perdita and Juanita, or just Perdita. It's a whole universe of books and stuff. And this is just like one, part of the story. But so yeah, he worked like with Lynch on adapting this and everything. And he's like, "Hey, like," but tells Lynch after he sees like one of the first cuts, is like, "Well, you left out the or it might not even made it to the cut. It might have been just like when he was reading the final cut of the script." And he's like, "Hey, but you left out the like the main line." And he's like, "What?" And then Lynch like went back. He's like, "Oh yeah, I did." And then he added it in. So he was just very easygoing. It's like, "Oh yeah, or you must have missed that," and then adds it. And so the line did make it in. So yeah, we cut to the next day, and there's Sailor. He's just waiting. He's ready for this robbery, but you could tell he's already having second thoughts. And he's like, "Man, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this." And then right when he's about to give up and go home or go back to the room is when here comes Bobby and Perdita together in the car pull up, and he's like, "Fuck, what the fuck is she doing here?" And he's like, "What? Like, oh, you know each other? Like, she's just coming along. She's just one of my friends, she's gonna be the driver, So we know, and now Sailor knows, like, okay, this shit's not about to go well. So they pull up to this feed store, which is like another town over, and Sailor and Bobby go in. They got the pantyhose on their heads, and they got some shotguns, and they head into the feed store while Perdita's waiting in the car. Who pulls up but a cop, obviously. Like, how could this go more wrong? And so cop pulls up. He's talking to Perdita, and he's like, "Hey, what you doing around here, lady?" And then he's just like, "Oh, waiting for my husband." Well, she says it in Spanish. She's like, "Mi esposo." And then, like, he's asking, like, "Where are you from?" And like, "Oh, we're over in Big Tuna." And, all this different stuff. They're going back and forth. And, he's, she's trying to be as, like, inconspicuous as possible. But, and we cut back to inside while the robbery's going on, and immediately Bobby's fucking it up. Like there, it was supposed to be nobody gets hurt. He's shoots one of the clerks, and then they go to get the money. Or there's after he's like supposed to have gotten the money, and he shoots one of the clerks, and like Sailor's like, what the fuck are you doing? And then like Bobby just starts laughing, like, and he looks like extra creepy with the pantyhose, like with his like fucked up smile, and he's like, "You're next, fucker," and starts pointing the gun towards Sailor, and then he like gets out of the way, and they go outside, or Sailor makes it out the door, and then the cop's out there obviously because he's heard the gunshots, so he's got his gun drawn. First, as soon as the gunshots are heard by the people outside, Perdita like kind of half runs him over and knocks him out, and then she gets out of there, and then the cop gets up, because he didn't like fully get hit by the car, and he's got his gun drawn. When Sailor comes out, Sailor immediately just gets on the floor and or gets on the ground with hands up and everything, and then here comes Bobby with his shotgun, and then the cops saying freeze. Bobby points the gun, goes to shoot him, gets shot multiple times, like gets shot in the leg, and then another one. Eventually, like before he can pull the trigger, it like knocks back like up towards him, and he blows his own head off. And it's like, it was super well. It's really not all that bad. It's pretty graphic, but it did have to get like toned down by the the MPAA is they're a crock of shit anyway, but they're like, nope, you can't have it be that bloody. So I think David had to like shave a few seconds off and then like put like a fire explosion or something, just to like kind of obscure the graphicness or something. But you can watch the uncut version on the Blu-ray, and I'm sure you could probably find it on fucking YouTube or something. But yeah, so Bobby blows his own head off. That's there. At least there's that part's happy. But now Sailor's been in this robbery, and he's going back to prison. So, and then we get then it cuts to Lula like screaming his name, like Sailor. But then we see that she's either like at the police station or like the courthouse or something, and just like wait, obviously he's been prosecuted and is going away. And then the mom and Santos show up, and she's she's trying to comfort her daughter. Obviously she's like pissed, like what are you even doing here, and then like Santos is like, oh, give me a hug, wrong fucking time, dude, but obviously he's just like a bad guy. So yeah, this time he's in jail for 5 years, 10 months, and 21 days, or at least in between like when last we saw them and when it's cutting to him about to get out. And there's Lula at her home, because this is years later, and she's home with her son, and she's talking to her mom on the phone, and the mom's like, you better not be thinking about going to like see him. And she's like, bitch, please, hangs up the phone and throws water on the picture of her mom, another, throw water on the witch, more Wizard of Oz stuff. And oh yeah, and then the mom like screams on the other side of the phone, like when the Wicked Witch gets wet. So it's her and the son pulling up to the prison to pick him up, and it's a little more awkward this time. I mean, it's been much longer of a time period, and now there's a kid that he hasn't met in person, and he's feeling self-conscious about this because he's missed so much, and she's feeling weird about it because he's missed so much, so it's not the like happy ending that either of them were expecting, and he's kind of feeling that, and he's just like, I just don't think I'm right for you, or this whole thing is wrong, and I think you'll just be better off without me. And he, goes to leave, and then she's saying no, like it's, not like that, but he's just like adamant about it, and then he ends up leaving. As he's leaving, he gets jumped by a gang of people, and it's like typical unrealistic gang of like diverse people that always shows up in these movies, and so he's like, what do you F words want, and he uses the gay F word, and they beat him up, and then while he's like passed out, he gets a vision of Glinda from Wizard of Oz, played by Cheryl Lee, Laura Palmer, and she's like basically tells him like, don't run away from your life, like Lula's the love of your life, go be with her. And then so it's this like epiphany that he's like doing the wrong thing, and he needs to go be with the one that he's supposed to be with. So he gets up and he's like, hey, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'm sorry for calling you guys homosexuals. See you later, and then he just takes off and gets reunited with Lula, and then they kiss, and then he starts singing Love Me Tender, and then that's the whole end credits. As the credits are rolling, it's just him singing Elvis's Love Me Tender because now she's going to be his wife. So but yeah, that's Wild at Heart. Yeah, great movie, pretty weird. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, which was surprising, but that's a lot of good movies have. So I guess it's not too surprising, but it's just that, hey, at least one of these David Lynch movies got like a real big deal award, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's a great one. Definitely, I hope you guys checked it out before listening to this. That's always preferred. But it's your life. I should probably start putting like spoiler warnings at the beginning of the episodes, like some kind of dynamic thing that pops up at the beginning of each one. But I don't know. To me, I feel like it's common sense that if you're going to listen to a podcast episode about something or a YouTube video about something, that it's going to have spoilers for that thing. I don't know. To me, that's just a given. I don't think I have enough listeners or viewers to actually complain about that. So I haven't heard shit about it. So, you do you in the end. I feel like that's an obvious thing. But yeah, great movie. I hope you guys enjoyed it if you did watch it for the first time. But yeah, it's a fun one. So yeah, next week we're going to be back on Twin Peaks, this time with season 2. And I'm not the plan is for it to be 2 episodes for season 2, but that's really going to depend on how long I go when I'm talking about it, because I don't want to necessarily put out a 4-hour episode or anything like that, but we'll see. So either way, it's going to be Twin Peaks season 2. I just don't know if it's going to be the first 11 episodes, the first 5 I don't know. So maybe it's going to be the whole fucking season. I don't know. So just stay tuned. But yeah, thank you guys for listening or watching, whichever one you guys do. It is on all the podcast apps. It's on YouTube. Rate and review, subscribe, all the basics. Smash that like button, all that fucking shit. So, thank you guys. I really do appreciate it. I know, like, I sound very dismissive at the end part, but it's just because I really don't like promoting myself. So that's the part I don't like, but I am very appreciative of anyone who's consuming this and enjoying it. So I truly do mean, like, thank you guys. Even though I might get sarcastic about the like and subscribe and all that stuff. So, but yeah, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys next week. Thanks. Bye.